When people think of witch hunts, Salem pops to mind. Pointy hats, broomsticks, and the fine art of accusing neighbors whose cats dared roam after dark. But let's dust off that crystal ball. Salem was far from the only broom in the closet. The myth? Salem grabs all the fame and infamy as the birthplace and tombstone of witch trials. Blame tourism brochures or Arthur Miller, but ask history and it'll sigh, waving centuries of receipts. Europe had been brewing magical hysteria long before Salem took center stage. Think less small-town drama, more continental panic. Germany, Scotland, and France? Real hotspots? Screaming, "She's a witch," wasn't a New England quirk. It was practically a European national sport. Here's the twist. Salem's witch trials claimed under 25 lives, including a guy who got squished for refusing to plead. Grim? Absolutely. But compared to Europe's body count, it's almost quaint. Across the Atlantic, tens of thousands perished in cauldrons of accusation from the 1400s to the 1700s. If Salem's witch trials were a horror flick, Europe's were a multi-season franchise, bigger special effects, bloodier scripts. And don't think this spooky epidemic stayed confined to Europe and colonial America. Witch hunts left deep scars in Africa, Asia, and the Americas at large. Some places still blame their troubles on a suspect with suspiciously pointy shoes. If blaming witches was the original viral conspiracy theory, TikTok has nothing on this global hysteria. So yes, Salem has drama worthy of community theater, but when it comes to real carnage, Europe still holds the broomstick crown. Next time you hear witch hunt, remember, Salem showed up late to one very, very deadly party. While Salem is often highlighted, misconceptions about witch trials extend to the methods of execution as well. Picture an angry mob, pitchforks leveled, dragging a so-called witch to a roaring bonfire. Can you smell the smoke yet? Hold your horses? That classic scene, flames licking the hems of a black dress while chanting villagers cheer, is less a historical fact and more a Hollywood fever dream. Witch burning is the horror icon we all know, but reality had a different flavor. And for pyromaniacs, a bit of a letdown. Let's douse this myth. In England and colonial America, accused witches rarely got the fiery finale. Instead, the hangman's noose was the go-to instrument. Morbid, certainly, but less likely to singe your eyebrows off. So if you packed marshmallows for your next seance, bonfires were for s'mores, not sorceresses, across much of the English-speaking world. The truth is, cranking up the heat was more a continental fashion. In Roman law countries like Germany and France, inquisitors favored a dash of drama. Nothing says, "Don't do witchcraft," like public immolation. Sometimes it was all smoke and mirrors. Burns could be symbolic or reserved for a corpse if the accused conveniently kicked it before sentencing. Extra crispy, anyone? Across the map, executions were a pick-your-poison buffet. Drowning, crushing, or for those who preferred splashes over flames, the ever-popular ducking stool. Every region had its favorite grisly twist. No territory cornered the market on melodrama. So why the obsession with blazing witches? Maybe the real witchcraft was how history conjured this fiery myth. The only thing reliably burning everywhere was our collective imagination. Now, who's up for a toasted marshmallow? Beyond the method of execution, there are also mistaken beliefs regarding the demographics of the accused. Scene: the Witch Hunt Diversity Office. Hook. Picture a witch trial, and you probably imagine a gaggle of furious villagers pointing at some poor woman with cheekbones sharp enough to slice bread. Maybe she's rocking a pointy hat, cackling, and clutching a suspiciously crunchy broom. Classic, right? Myth. Thanks to pop culture and Halloween stores, witches are forever old crones with enough wrinkles to stash spare change, shrieking at the moon, or hexing crops if you so much as glance sideways at their cat. Witch trials? Oh, just pure misogyny, sprinkled with soot and questionable headgear. Or so the story goes. Facts. Torch holders at the ready. History's messier. Plenty of men got accused, tortured, and flambéed as witches, sometimes with even more enthusiasm than their female counterparts. In Iceland, for instance, the so-called Wizard Wonderland, men dominated the accused list. Turns out, in the 1600s, the village mob was the ultimate equal opportunity employer. Punch. Witch hunting, because panic and prejudice are best friends forever. The criteria? Rarely doing witchy things, but often alive, nearby, and possibly hanging out with a suspicious goat. Young women, old men, sassy neighbors, hapless kids, everyone got a shot at the village's hottest ticket to misery. Bridge. Sure, Salem was basically a girls-only embarrassment, and pop culture loves to cast tragic, misunderstood women in the leading roles. But step off the Hollywood set and you'll see, this wasn't a gender-only gig. Religious freakouts, local politics, and neighborhood grudges shared the stage with sexism. So next time someone drops witch trials, remember, the real horror was the all-access panic pass. Cheekbones optional, just maybe steer clear of any goats. Misunderstandings about who the accused were often compared with myths about their appearance. Picture this, 1692, Salem's hottest fashion show. Everyone in black, pointy hats cocked at jaunty angles, ready to hex the runway. At least that's what Hollywood would have you believe. If every accused witch really sported black, someone should have been charged with running the world's first dry cleaning racket. New magic spell, Stanius, be gone. Thanks to movies and Halloween stores hardwiring this look into our brains, millions picture Salem as early Hogwarts meets Gothic runway. But let's drop the wands and pick up some dusty court records. Spoiler alert, the scariest thing about their outfits was the absolute lack of reliable laundry detergent. Actual trial records don't mention dramatic capes, killer hats, or bedazzled broomsticks. Most accused witches were everyday folks spending more time folding beige aprons than brewing potions under a full moon. And here's the real twist. The iconic pointy hat wasn't even a part of their wardrobe until centuries later. Historians suspect it was cribbed from spicy anti-Quaker propaganda or cobbled together from European folklore. So much for Coven chic. Salem style was more colonial frump. Forget designer hats. The town's biggest accessory was crippling paranoia, not millinery. Next time you see a coven head to toe in black, remember, at the real Salem trials, the only drama was in the accusations, not the outfits. The runway was beige, the vibe was humble, and the only spells cast involved hoping no one noticed yesterday's soup stain on your apron. False imagery also surrounds the nature of witches' confessions during trials. Imagine confessing to flying on broomsticks just to get your trial over with. Yes, really? All right, fine. I hexed the mayor's sheep. Can we call it a day? If witch trials were reliable, Hogwarts would have had a courtroom, not a sorting hat. Yet for centuries, people clung to these confessions as if they were gospel. Ironclad proof that dark magic was lurking in every village. But reality? It's more jittery espresso than solemn verdict. Most confessions were wrung out through a cocktail of sleep deprivation, vague threats, and a dash of creative prompting from local law enforcers. Think Law and Order meets improv night. Facing day 3 of Spill Your Crimes or Else, accused witches often owned up to everything, from cauldrons turning acorns into donkeys to midnight rendezvous with Satan himself. Honestly, confessing to a demon date was easier than explaining why your neighbor suddenly hates your goat. The stories got spicier as delirium set in. Who wouldn't dream up a demon lover under that kind of pressure? And to the powdered, wig-wearing judges, these ramblings sounded downright convincing. Skepticism strictly off the docket. As for bona fide, wand-wielding, cackling at moonlight magic, actual evidence, 0. Unless surviving a week without sleep counts as supernatural. These confessions reveal more about the interrogator's vivid imaginations than the accused's magical escapades. So next time someone invokes historical sorcery confessions, remember, the real spell was convincing exhausted villagers they could fly. After 3 sleepless nights, they probably believed it, broomsticks and all. Interpreting confessions narrowly can obscure the broader motivations behind witch trials. Hook. Witches. History's go-to scapegoats for everything from sour milk to slipping on banana peels. One odd mishap away from a dunk in the river. Just to be sure you weren't plotting evil against someone's pet newt. Myth. Most of us like to think witch trials were all about religious heresy. A fiery, holy hunt for the soul-deep sinners riding broomsticks, right? Just some pious elders rooting out broomstick-wielding pagans and heretics? Facts, not quite. The truth was a grim cocktail of politics, land grabs, gender battles, and classic neighborhood grudges. Imagine being blamed for a bad harvest or a mystery rash, basically the medieval version of blame the intern. Forget sacred relics. All it took to start a witch trial was a cranky neighbor with a grudge and a cow with indigestion. Many accusers had a hidden agenda, coveting a rival's property. Accusing them of witchcraft was the Renaissance equivalent of, "Let's settle this by seizing your land." Punch. If witch trials were purely religious, then my overflowing email inbox is purely an existential crisis. The reality? Local authorities, those ambitious power players where church and state blurred worse than my vision after a mead-fueled medieval night, ran most trials. And who got caught in the crossfire? Vulnerable women. Being smart, outspoken, or just memorable in the 1600s was as dangerous as wearing socks in the shower. Bridge. So remember, witch hunts weren't just sacred panic, they were messy power plays wrapped in superstition. Next time someone blames bad vibes, be glad the property-seizing show trials got left in history's cauldron. Mostly. The cause of witch hunts is often simplified as purely religious, tied to a supposed medieval frenzy. Imagine huddling in a dimly lit, torch-flickering room, terrified that your neighbor's penchant for herbal tea might brand you both as witches. You clutch your amulet, eyeing Mildred suspiciously, her rosemary remedies just a little too cozy. Everyone knows medieval Europe was all about witch hunts, right? Buzzkill, that's a myth stickier than a cauldron of caramel. Popular lore casts medieval townsfolk as pitchfork-wielding, spell-sniffing maniacs, ready to roast anyone fond of cats or chamomile. But the historical receipts tell a different story. The infamous European witch craze mostly skipped the knights and castles Middle Ages. Those massive witch hunts, the ones that sent a collective chill through Europe, actually peaked during the polished Renaissance of the 16th and 17th centuries. Think less Monty Python's Holy Grail, more Renaissance's next top witch hunt. Sure, medieval times had quirks. Grumpy elves, the occasional werewolf cameo. But witch trials were rare, small-time village drama. Most folks were too busy battling plagues, famine, and flying chunks of masonry to stage a full-blown witch panic. And the notorious Malleus Maleficarum, your DIY witch purging manual, wasn't printed until 1487, well after knights ditched their chainmail. So why all the Renaissance hysteria? Blame it on politics, religious upheaval, and a world nervously changing its pants. The mass witch panic was more about power plays than actual spellcasting. Blaming medieval peasants for witch hunts is like blaming ancient Romans for reality TV. Sure, they had drama, but the format was decidedly later. Medieval villagers? Masters of turnip farming, not pointy hat profiling. Finally, assumptions about the time and place of witch trials tend to confine them narrowly to rural superstition. Picture witch trials as dusty rural affairs populated by pitchfork-wielding yokels in suspiciously pointy hats. A quaint countryside pastime, right? Wrong. Thanks to too many Halloween decorations, we've been sold the idea that witch hunts belonged exclusively to remote villages, where the highlight of the week was spying on your neighbor's turnip. The myth insists city folks are far too cultured for superstitious cauldrons and curses. But let's stir the pot. Historical records reveal that major European cities like Paris and London weren't calmly sipping tea while villagers brandished pitchforks. In fact, bustling German market towns buzzed with as much witch hunt hysteria as any hamlet, and Scottish courts located smack dab in urban centers eagerly prosecuted witches with all the legal pomp you'd expect. Even the urban elite weren't off the hook. Judges, university professors, and sharp-suited city lawyers swapped their wigs for moral panic when witch trials came calling. Turns out, city cobblestones echoed the same fearful footsteps as village greens did. Mass panics and witch-hunting crackdowns lit up urban nights, proving that the only real difference between town and country was the price tag on your torch. So what's the magical takeaway? Witch trial fever was a democratic disaster, hitting farmers and socialites alike. Whether you harvested herbs by the river or shopped for hat feathers beside the cathedral, no alibi was safe from accusations brewed in the cauldron of public panic. Sorry, city slickers, sophistication didn't grant immunity from a full-blown witch hunt meltdown.